Hi, Anil, and it's a pleasure talking to you and also the viewers of Dr. HR channel. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm really feeling excited to share some of the nuances on the labor code, what it beholds for the organizations as well as the employees. And maybe I'll address some of these key aspects which are going to change life for the HR professionals, business leaders, and maybe the trade unions and the employees who are also stakeholders of the changes which are on the anvil. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And certainly I would like to make it very interesting. I'm Naresh Kumar Pinsetti. I currently am associated with Deepak Fertilizers and Petrochemicals Corporation Limited. This is a company based out of headquartered in Pune with 5 manufacturing units across India, and we have a subsidiary in Australia. So I've been with this company for the last 8 years, leading HR, and now also taking care of corporate governance, which involves the internal audit, the vigilance, and few other functions reporting into me. So I been with the industry, mostly the manufacturing industry, for the last 38 years. So, but that's not the subject which we are going to talk about. That's a brief introduction about me. And quickly jumping on to the subject for this today's conversation, which is centered around the implications of these changes in the employment laws in the name of labor code. So you all must be aware that the current NDA government has decided that the 29 labor legislations are to be codified into 4 laws. So this attempt is in sync with the current economic scenario, because this is long overdue. As you all aware, 1991, we have seen the economic reforms, the liberalization, privatization, and globalization, which was driven by Mr. Narasimha Rao and Mr. Manmohan Singh at that time. And thereafter, the industry has been crying hoarse that these labor laws or employment laws are outdated in India. They are archaic and they are not in sync with the economic reality of the day. You opened up the economy, but you never did anything with the employment laws. So when the Vajpayee government came into power, they constituted the Second National Commission on Labor. Mr. Ravindra Verma was the chairman of the commission. I had some opportunity to go before the commission and share my thoughts on the state of labor laws in India. So that commission came out with their report in 2002, which actually recommended sweeping changes in the labor laws. But unfortunately, the next governments had to run a coalition government. Though that was the need of the hour, they could not push through these legislation because of the pushback from the trade unions. And also, they don't want to take a chance with the coalition government. Now, it's certainly heartening that the current government has embarked upon bringing these changes to a large extent based on the recommendations of the Second National Commission on Labor. And also, they have taken into consideration the changing reality. Like, for example, today, we are in a startup scenario. You have the gig workers, you have the platform workers, there's a huge unorganized sector. So these are something new which the current employment laws actually plan to address. So if you will have to ask me why these reforms, then my answer would be now or never, because if we'll have to keep sync with the developed economies and also create an environment for ease of doing business, because the industry is still burdened with these outdated labor laws. We don't have power to adjust our workforce. Even if the company is suffering badly, we can't touch the manpower. Of course, the organizations and HR professionals have come out with innovative ways of implementing voluntary retirement schemes, but that's not easy. So I think this is a step in the right direction taken by the government. Certainly there are certain advantages to the organizations, but at the same time, we need to take it with a pinch of salt. There are certainly a negative side to these changes, but then the government, of course, has to achieve a balance between the interests of the workmen and the interests of the organizations. And to my mind, I think they do a pretty good work. Though there is scope for some more, I would say, changes in whatever the government wanted to bring in through this labor code. The government was very keen that they should implement these changes in laws from the 1st of April 2021. But of course, we had this pandemic. Then there are also objections from the employers' federations, the trade unions. Then the current labor minister came on record and then he said, I will have some discussions with both the bodies, bring them onto a mutual understanding before we actually roll out. So it is unlikely that these laws will be implemented during this current financial year. So what we can expect is maybe 1st April 2022 could be a good time for these laws to actually being implemented. And the organizations are already preparing how do they actually change their employee policies, change the structures of their compensation, the components of their compensation. So people are actually working on this. As you all know, you also must be part of this transformation which is on the anvil. So let's talk about some of the key aspects of these changes, which most of the organizations have welcomed already, including the CII, FICCI, the ASSOCHAM, Employers Federation of India. So one of the key changes I would say is extending the provisions of Chapter 5B of Industrial Disputes Act. That is the requirement of permission from the government before laying off, that is temporarily stopping people from employment because of any unforeseen business situation, retrenching, that is downsizing, or closing down a sick industrial establishment. Previously, as you know, any establishment employing more than 100 workmen, they need to approach the government and seek permission and give a lamba choda lot of explanations in terms of why we are doing it. Government will say, why don't you continue? So even if a sick industrial establishment, they want to right size or they want to close down, they never had that, I would say, authority to do so. Now they have extended that threshold limit from 100 to 300. That means the majority of the industrial establishment will be now out of the ambit of this permission to be sought from the government for either laying off, retrenching, or closing an undertaking. So this is certainly, I would say, if the company is in the red and they are unable to run it any longer, so the entrepreneur should have the authority to close it down, of course, by following the due process of law, paying all the dues to the employees, taking care of whatever are the social security aspects. That is now made very flexible. This is one, I would say, welcome change which has been brought up under this proposed law. The second major change to my mind is in terms of the strikes and lockouts. As you all know, earlier under the Industrial Disputes Act, any workman or trade union, if they are allowed to go on strike, or any establishment, if they are allowed to lock out, unless it is a public utility service, public utility service is notified under the Industrial Disputes Act, some of these emergency operations, all those things, you know, waterworks, electricity department, these kind of things are declared as public utility services. They need to give a notice of a minimum of 14 days before going on strike. Otherwise, any other establishment which is not a public utility service, they can go on strike. There is no need for issuing a notice or declaring a lockout. Now what the government did, which is a sore point for the trade unions today, there is a need for notice. Any establishment, irrespective of it being a public utility service, if the workers want to go on strike or the employer want to lock out, he needs to invariably give a notice of 14 days. That means the right to strike has been taken away. Because as you all know, as IR and HR professionals, when somebody gives a notice of strike, the matter will be admitted in conciliation. The government conciliation officer will jump into the picture. And once the matter is admitted in conciliation, the strike is prohibited. The strike becomes illegal. So the unions are now saying, we can't go on a legal strike. We give a notice, the conciliation officer will enter the picture, it becomes an illegal strike. So you are taking away the right to strike. This is a major objection from the trade unions. Now this is a very welcome move to all the organizations who are actually suffering from some kind of an industrial relations problems. Not every organization, but some organizations. The next one we see as an important change is the industrial disputes. I've been privy to some industrial disputes. When I joined an organization, some workmen went to the labor court saying that this company dismissed me 20 years ago. I need relief. It is an illegal termination of service. So where are the records 20 years ago? Where is this guy? What was he doing in this company? Nobody was there because there was no time limit for raising an industrial disputes under the existing law. But this new law says you can't raise an industrial dispute after 2 years of the subject matter coming into the picture. There is a law of limitation now. So we can all breathe easy. We don't have to worry that some fellow 20 years ago, something happened, he goes to a labor court and we don't know, we don't have any records. So this is another welcome change. The next change I would like to talk about is the provision of fixed term employment, FTEs, that's what we call. We do have fixed term employment contracts with managers, but now this new law is opening it up to the workers also. So this is another sore point for the trade unions. The trade unions are afraid that organizations will now employ workers on fixed term employment, though they are eligible for all the statutory benefits, irrespective of the threshold limit on their service. Say, for example, somebody to be eligible to gratuity has to put in a service of 5 years. But if I am hiring somebody as a fixed term employee, I need to pay him gratuity even for 1 year of service, irrespective of the minimum eligible period of service being put on by him. So now this is a good thing for the organizations. When I have a sudden increase in workload, I would go ahead and hire some fixed term employees. When there is a downturn in my business, I can adjust my workforce. I don't have to be exposed to the vagaries of this permission from the government. If I'll have to right size, if I'll have to lay off. So this is also helping me in terms of ease of doing business. But then the unions are afraid that the managements will misuse this provision. So of course, which professional organization will misuse this? At the same time, their fears are not unfounded, looking at the way some organizations operate. Another one, I think, which would certainly go to reduce the litigation, which is a source of great litigation, is the contract labor. You know, today, around 40% of the workforce in the Indian manufacturing industry or even service industry is coming from contract labor. So the contract labor explosion is indirectly linked to the archaic legislation in India. You can only hire somebody, you can't fire as per the existing laws. So industry resorted to innovative methods of hiring contract labor so that they don't have the security of tenure. They can be exploited. The contractors will actually be handling them. The organization is not their employer. They can't raise industrial disputes. So indirectly, the very workers whom the trade unions are trying to protect through these outdated labor laws, it has become a nemesis for them, led to the mushrooming of contract labor in India. Anybody who is studying the growth of contract labor in Indian industry would easily relate it to this archaic labor laws. So now what is that the government is doing is, they are clearly defining only in core activities of an organization, you should not be hiring contract labor. So that means if I'm into an airline business, that means pilots or the people, the cabin crew, the technicians, the aircraft maintenance technicians. This is all core activity of an airline. So let's take an airline is actually operating a canteen. Like you look at the case of Air India, where they have given their canteen contractor to India Coffee House. Then the workmen of India Coffee House went to court claiming that we are the employees of Air India. That went on for a litigation. Running a canteen is not the core activity of Air India, nor for that matter any organization. Let's say if Infosys is running a canteen, it's not their core activity. Earlier, that was the subject matter of a lot of litigation, and there were court judgments saying that the canteen workers are deemed to be the employees of the organization. Now, this new law is actually providing a lot of clarity. It clearly exempted canteens, security, housekeeping, gardening, any other allied activities connected to an industrial establishment as a non-core activity. That means you are given the flexibility to outsource those operations. This is a welcome move. I think this would reduce a lot of litigation and put an end to the existing unavoidable litigation. So the employers can certainly heave a sign of relief here. Trade union recognition. Today in India, we have Industrial Disputes Act, Trade Unions Act. Neither of these acts talk about the recognition of trade unions. It's an unfortunate situation. If I have 2-3 trade unions in my industrial establishment, unless I am in a state like Maharashtra, Kerala, West Bengal, or Rajasthan, where there are state laws for recognition of trade unions, it's a contentious issue. I love to follow the code of discipline. Am I a signatory? The union is a signatory to the code of discipline. All these questions keep coming up. Now this new proposed law is putting a rest to all those things, where it says that any trade union in an industrial establishment, if it is a single union, it needs to be recognized as the bargaining agent. That means they will negotiate with the management on the benefits, working conditions, all these aspects concerning the workers in that establishment. If there are more than 2 trade unions, any trade union having 50%, 51% of the membership, they'll have to be recognized as the recognized union. There could be multiplicity of trade unions. Say, for example, I was talking to somebody in Tamil Nadu paper boards. They've got 80 trade unions. Steel Authority of India have got 200 trade unions. So how do you recognize a trade union there? The law is coming up with something called a negotiating council, which actually says every trade union, in a scenario of a multiplicity of trade unions, every trade union having 20% of membership will be given membership of one trade union representative on the negotiating council. That means the negotiating council at the maximum can comprise of 5 trade union representatives. Could be 5 different trade unions, could be 3 different trade unions based on their membership strength. This is something is very good, which is happening. But this is an experiment. We need to wait and see, because each trade union has got their own agenda, their own ideology. They have their political affiliations. You are trying to bring a heterogeneous combination of people and asking them to form a negotiating council and negotiate with the management. How do you settle matters with this heterogeneous group of people with different ideologies? So this is something with which the HR and IR professionals has to grapple with, once this new law is implemented. So we'll have to keep our fingers crossed here how this experiment is going to work.